The obsidian citadel stood at the edge of the void expanse, a monument to fear itself. Within its central chamber, bound by chains forged from collapsed stars, lay Vextharion, the last dragon, the world ender, the creature whose very name had become synonymous with annihilation across 100 civilized worlds. For 1,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained the prison. For 1,000 years, automated systems delivered sustenance through dimensional portals. For 1,000 years, no living being had set foot in that chamber, until Grace arrived. The human engineer stepped through the reinforced doorway, her boots echoing against ancient metal. Behind her visor, her brown eyes studied the massive form curled in the chamber center. Vextharion's scales, once brilliant crimson, had faded to the color of dried blood. The chains wrapped around his body pulsed with energy fields that would tear apart any creature foolish enough to approach. Diagnostics show a cascade failure in the containment matrix, Grace said into her comm. I'm going to need to inspect the primary anchors. Negative, Engineer Torres, came the sharp reply from Commander Ezra aboard the orbital station. Protocol forbids direct contact. Deploy drones for assessment. Grace glanced at her scanner. The electromagnetic interference is too strong. Drones won't function within 50 meters. It's manual inspection or system failure within 72 hours. Silence stretched across the channel. She could imagine Ezra's expression. The Valorian officer had made his opinion of human recklessness abundantly clear during the journey here. Commander, she pressed, if the containment fails, this entire sector becomes a death zone. I didn't travel 3 months through hyperspace to watch from a safe distance. Another pause. Then, with obvious reluctance, proceed. But maintain constant communication. Grace smiled beneath her helmet. Copy that. She approached the dragon slowly, methodically scanning each chain link. The closer she came, the more the air itself seemed to resist her movement. Thick with ancient power and older malice. The Krell had built this prison. The Zanari had reinforced it. The Volthain had added their own failsafes. 3 of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, all agreeing on one thing. Vextharion must never be free. Humanity, newest to the galactic community, had simply been handed the maintenance contract. 20 meters from the dragon, Grace's equipment began to malfunction. 40 meters, and her suit's temperature regulators struggled against waves of residual heat. At 10 meters, she could see the individual scales, each larger than her entire body, rising and falling with breath. The dragon was awake. One massive eye opened, pupil contracting to a vertical slit. It regarded her with the weight of centuries, an intelligence vast and terrible and utterly alien. Grace froze, every survival instinct screaming. But she'd studied the files. She'd read the histories, and she'd noticed what every other species had apparently missed. Hello, she said quietly. The eye widened fractionally. Torres, what are you doing? Ezra's voice crackled with static. Move away from the entity immediately. The anchor point is damaged, Grace continued, ignoring the commander. She pointed at where one chain met the floor, where stress fractures spiderwebbed through ancient metal. That's why the system's failing. The chains are too tight. They've been constricting for 1,000 years. Vextharion's other eye opened. A sound emerged from deep within his chest. Not a growl, but something more complex. Almost like speech, if speech could be made of earthquakes and volcanic fury. Grace's translator struggled, then produced words. Why? Do you speak on to me? Because you're in pain, she said simply. And because I need to fix this anchor before the whole system collapses. The others never spoke. They feared. Yeah, well. Grace knelt beside the chain, examining the connection point. Humans are pretty good at doing things we're not supposed to do. It's kind of our whole deal. She pulled tools from her pack, aware that one movement from the creature beside her could end her existence in an instant. But the readings were clear. The anchor was failing not from weakness but from excessive tension. The chains had been tightening incrementally, automated systems responding to the dragon's slightest movements with increased restraint. 1,000 years of slowly increasing torture. Torres. Ezra's voice was barely audible now. We're reading massive energy signatures. Evacuate immediately. Almost done. Grace muttered, working her plasma torch carefully around the anchor point. She wasn't cutting the chain, just the damaged attachment, preparing to reconnect it properly. Just need to... There. The anchor released with a sound like thunder. The chain slackened, dropping several inches. Throughout the chamber, other chains adjusted, their tension equalizing. Bextharian's entire body shuddered. Then, to Grace's shock, the great head lowered until one enormous eye was level with her. "For 1,000 years," the dragon said, voice growing stronger. "They tightened my bonds, every movement punished, every breath restricted. I who once flew between stars could barely move my wings. I'm sorry," Grace said, and meant it. The system was automated. No one was actually checking. "But you came. You spoke. You helped." The eye blinked slowly. Why? Grace considered the question. Around her she could feel the residual anger in the air, the barely contained rage of a being imprisoned for crimes committed before her species had even left its home world. "Because," she said finally, "every species in this galaxy looked at you and saw a monster to be contained. They saw the world ender, the destroyer, the threat. But when I read the files, I saw something else." "What?" "A person in pain, punished beyond reason, forgotten by everyone." She stood, meeting that massive gaze steadily. "Maybe you did terrible things. Maybe you deserved imprisonment. But you didn't deserve torture, and you definitely didn't deserve to be treated as less than sentient." The dragon was silent for a long moment. Then, with careful deliberation, it lowered its head completely to the floor, a gesture of submission or perhaps respect. "The human species is young," Bextharian said, "weak by galactic standards. Your homeworld is barely noticed among the great powers. Yet you dare what others would not. You show mercy where mercy was abandoned." "We're good at that too," Grace said, allowing herself a small smile. "It's kind of our thing." "Then hear me." Grace tores of earth. The dragon's voice resonated through the chamber. "When these chains finally break, and they will break, for all things do eventually, I will remember this day. I will remember that a human showed kindness when none other would. And I will repay this debt." Grace felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. She just made a promise with a creature that had destroyed worlds. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," she said. "But you're welcome." She backed away carefully, tools secured, leaving the dragon with chains properly calibrated for the first time in centuries. As she reached the doorway, she heard Bextharian's voice once more. "Your species will go far, human. You dare touch what others fear. You show compassion where others show only cruelty. These are the marks of those destined for greatness or magnificent ruin. I await with interest to see which path you choose." Grace paused at the threshold. "Maybe," she said, "we'll surprise you and choose both." The dragon's laughter followed her out, a sound like distant thunder, both terrible and strangely warm. Above, in orbit, Ezra was already preparing his report for the council. But Grace knew the truth. Humanity had just made its first real ally in the galaxy. It just happened to be the most feared creature in known space, and somehow that felt exactly right. End.